Today, we're being joined by Diana Larsen. Diana is one of the most influential voices in agile leadership. Uh, she has authored many influential books, such as Agile Retrospectives, Liftoff, and Lead Without Blame. She also co created the Agile Fluency model, which, if you haven't come into contact with it, is really insightful and interesting. She has for decades helped leaders build resilient, high performing teams, and her work combines deep systems thinking with practical tools for creating cultures of learning and sustainable delivery. Diana, welcome to the show. Really nice to have you here.
Thank you, Jade. So good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you again. I've benefited a lot from your work personally, and I'm really happy to expose more people to your work. You're known for many things, but you're probably most famous for Agile Retrospectives, Team Liftoffs, and Agile Fluency. Would you agree with that?
Probably, yes. I'm hoping that the Lead Without Blame material will start moving up the scale, but I
Yeah,
think you're right. For now, it's retrospectives for sure, and then the other two, yeah.
I imagine we could spend a lot of time on any of those topics. We probably could have multi day workshops on any of those topics. I'll start with retrospectives.
hmm
And I guess I'm kind of curious like, you've seen so many different companies and so many different groups. And I'm really curious just kind of your overall critique of how people approach retrospectives. And if you have any like general advice that you think is a good place to start from
Yeah,
for a lot of people. I realize everything's context dependent.
right. Well, it over time, I've noticed a few things that where people are using retrospectives or having intentions around retrospectives that are really different than what Esther and I and David Horowitz now, who's co-author of the second edition, third author of the second edition, um, and or Norm Kurth, even, who was part of our inspiration to begin with, who wrote a book in the late '90s that was about retrospectives at the end of very large software projects, because that's what was going on then. You know, many years, lots of people involved, um, big, just big projects. And so he wrote a book about how at the end of those projects, how can you do some introspection about how it went and decide to make some changes for when you're going to do the next huge project like that. And he and I and Esther together created something called the Retrospective Facilitators Gathering that was really based on the material in his book. And that was, late '90s, early 2000s, right? And one of the times when we were having one of those retrospective meetings, some folks started saying, but wait, we're using agile methodologies now. We're working in sprints, we're working in iterations. Why do we have to wait all the way to the end of delivering the big project or the big product to make some improvements, to have continuous improvement, to have some changes? And then somebody said, well, one of us should write a book. And somebody else said, well, who's going to write that book? And all the fingers in the room pointed at Esther and me. and, and so we took it on. And that was 2004. And in another couple of years, we published the first Agile Retrospectives Making Good Teams Great book. And it was about how do we do continuous improvement in our organizations, in our teams more frequently so that we get the benefit of that. Now I think of it as even in terms of, if you're doing Pomodoros, in the Pomodoro book, Francesco Crio suggests you do, he doesn't call it a retrospective, but he describes a retrospective at the end of every Pomodoro. So, I mean, it is like building that continuous improvement engine for the team as frequently as possible, which when we first published the book in 2006, that was at the end of every sprint or every iteration. And so that was the intention. It's like, how do we help folks get this continuous improvement going? In the same time, there was a parallel effort going on, taking total quality movement and that kind of thing into IT that became lean IT and lean manufacturing. And there's a whole sense of continuous improvement practices there as well, because it helps, when you have this opportunity to continuously improve, it's like compounding interest, you just get more and more from everyone you do. So my observation has been that over time, people still will have a little checklist that says, here's the meetings you need to do, and they will want to check off the one that says retrospectives, but it is less often used for its intended purpose, which is continuous improvement. How do we continuously improve our teamwork? How do we continuously improve our work process? How do we continuously improve our product quality, our relationships with customers or product people, or any of those things, any and all of those things are up for grabs. So what's happened is either that people have been misusing retrospectives by saying, "Oh, we're just going to do this one little activity, and everybody will have fun with that, and then we're done." And there's no continuous improvement action that's following on, or there's no effort to make sure that that continuous improvement action goes on. And then other times I've heard, well, why do you need to have data from the sprint or whatever? This is just a time for the team to say, to vent or to just say how things are going for them. And it's like, well, that's a worthy thing to do, but in my mind, that's not a retrospective. It's a different activity. I mean, it may be an activity your team needs, but it's not a retrospective if it's not the team learning about what they just did together, then giving it some deeper thought, and then making some decisions, and then having a plan for following through on those decisions. So we thought lean or learn, think, act together as a team, which in the Lead Without Blame book we call co-intelligence, building co-intelligence in your team. And so that's been one thing. That's kind of two things. One is the intent of the retrospective toward continuous improvement isn't always honored. And the other thing is there's not always an action item, or which might be we need to do some more research or we need to talk to somebody and get some more information. It doesn't always have to be what we often think of as an action item, but it needs to be, how are we going to further our quality, improve how we work together, or whatever it is you choose. Something needs to come out of that so that you actually get that improvement. And so that's why we wrote the second edition, which has a lot more information in it than the first edition, because we were just seeing that people were struggling with this. And by and large, there were not that many teams that were remote or working virtually in 2006, 2004 to 2006 when we wrote the book. And so now in the new second edition, we've got a lot more information about hybrid and remote, and about how to make sure that you're moving into those improvement actions. And there's just a lot more information. It's more than twice as long. And it contains all the new stuff, because we know new people are entering the field all the time, and they need some of that foundational information that we had in the first book. So that stuff is still there, but we've added in a lot more that we've just discovered over the time. People needed more. People needed more than what we had provided in the first edition.
I really love how you describe it around continuous improvement because there can be something about that that is very natural feeling, but there's also something about that that requires a little bit more than just like a discussion.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot of the retrospectives I go to that aren't quite satisfying, they're exactly what you described. They're kind of, we talk about things, but we don't actually
Yeah.
like bend that
Yeah.
insight back towards
Right.
improvement.
Well, in the first edition, and we continued it in the second, we provided what we call I don't know if it's a framework or but it's a model, 5-step model. And the center of it is how our brains work, but as humans. And it starts with it's set the stage, gather data, generate insights, decide what to do, close the retrospective. So setting the stage and the closing the retrospective, I think, are essential too. But we sort of put those in because we knew in that first edition we were working with people who didn't have a lot of meeting facilitation skills, that they needed a little boost around that. So, but setting the stage is drawing your attention to the problem, which as humans, if I spill my coffee cup, I'm going to draw my attention to that problem. I've got a coffee cup sitting right here. If I draw,
Yeah, yeah.
if I spill that, I'm going to, oh, what happened? What tip? And then I'm going to gather some data about it. What made it tip over? Did I hit it with my hand? What just happened? Right? You need to kind of get that. And then you figure out, oh, well, what is it I want to have happen, and what 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 can I learn from doing this, and how do I need to put my little what's this called? My little thing that I set my cup on, my little cup
Mm-hmm.
pad. Do I need to put it in a different place? What are the options here? And then I will make a choice about which of those options to put into place, and then I'll be done with it. Oh, okay, good. Now that's done. I can move on. Well, that's set the stage, gather data, generate insights, decide what to do, close the retrospective, right? And as humans, we do that sometimes in a split second or in a couple of seconds. I mean, we do it very quickly. It's how our brains work. But when you have a group of people and you need to lead them through that process together so that they all arrive with the same decision and the same readiness to move on to the next thing, that takes a little more skill, and it takes a little bit more attention to how am I going to, how are we going to gather data? Do we need objective data? Do we need subjective data? What kind of data do we need to really look at this problem? In setting the stage, we discover the problem, we or the opportunity, and we define what that is, and then okay, now how do we gather some data about that, and then how do we together think about it, get some insights. What are the implications of it? I mean, all that, the analysis part, right? The thinking, and then we choose something out of our analysis and move on. And so we hoped we had described that clearly enough that people could put it in place. But what we've discovered is people will look through the activities in the book and grab one that looks appealing to them. Oh, well, let's just do start, stop, continue. Well, you do start, stop, continue before you've gathered data. What are
Yeah.
you working with here?
Yeah, exactly. You need some sort of context that
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
actually operating in.
Yeah, you need to have the group of people who's doing this needs to have a shared context and a shared sense of all the information that's available
Yeah.
before they move into an activity like start, stop, continue, or any of the other generate insights activities. And now there are so many activities available that are labeled as retrospective activities, online, all over the place. We actually focused a little less on that in the second edition because colleagues have just provided so much of that now that those are not so difficult to find. We still provided an essential few, but we didn't put our attention there as much. as we did on let's look at how you're really moving people through this ability to think together and come to some conclusions together. And way back when, after the first edition was published, and Esther and I had done some workshops at conferences and in a couple of organizations by that time, I was asked to speak at a conference in London. And before the conference started, there was this networking meeting, cocktail party kind of thing for all the speakers. And this one young man came up to me and he said, I was in your workshop at such and such a in such and such a conference, and he said I've really been using that information a lot. And he said I've learned the secret of retrospectives. And I said, well, what's share it
Yeah,
with
what's the
me.
secret?
Share it with
Yeah.
me. I'm not sure I know what the secret is. And he said, when your retrospectives start going well, all your other meetings go better too. And I think it is because it has that facilitation framework of here's how you lead a group to get to where they need to go. And Sam Kainer's written about that. Other folks have written about that. But that ability to take a group of people and help them think together, to learn together, think together, and then come to a decision place together is, I mean, it's not something that we learn in school. It's not it's we have to put some attention on it to really learn it.
I
So,
think that's really true.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And learning how to facilitate those things is
Right.
is a real skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which is applicable to a lot of other things as well. I mean, it's a generalizable skill, which is kind of nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like there's this thread going from here to Team Liftoff,
Yeah.
which um, just to share with people that are listening, I've experienced a little bit of this
Yeah.
secondhand
Yeah.
in a way. In that when I was at New Relic, we went through and kind of brought in some of the practices from the Team Liftoff book,
Yeah.
and it was pretty remarkable, like how powerful it is to like set up a team to be successful and
Yeah.
be very explicit about how you set it up. And so I would love if you could talk a little bit about the insights that led
Yeah.
you to write that book.
Right.
And also, if you have any sort of advice for people that are thinking about setting up a group of people to like work really effectively
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Well, what we haven't had for a long time is we have a website called teamliftoffs.com, which people can go and there's a Miro board and there's a bunch of different things that people can explore if they want to learn more about this, along with the book, the second edition of that book. However, what it really is about is, as I observed, being involved with teams who are presumably doing some kind of an agile approach to their work. And having gone through a couple of training programs and a couple of different methodologies, I had heard one um, facilitator and person actually was a manifesto signer who will remain nameless. And in the workshop I did with them, said, well, to get a team to self-organize, to really get a team, you put them all in a room and close the door, and pretty soon they will self-organize. And I was like, no, that's not that's not been my experience, right? And because before, when I was you and I talked about before I got into the agile world, I was in the work process improvement world, and we did a lot of team based work processes, and we always chartered the teams. And so I brought that information into the space, and I had Ainsley Neese, who was my co-author on the Liftoff book. Um, she she had had some of that experience too, And so we put our heads together and we said, it's just throwing them in a room together isn't enough. And particularly now, when so many teams are working remotely, we can't even throw them in a room together because
Yeah.
being on a Zoom screen together is not the same.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a very effective team working remotely, but you still need to put some of these things in place if you really want them to work well together right from the beginning and not waste a lot of time thrashing around trying to figure out what the work is and so on. And so the Liftoff book was intended to help people get that good start, to set a tone for how they were going to work together right from the beginning, to make sure they had clarity on what they were working on and why they were working. I still go into organizations who ask me to talk with their teams, and I'll ask their teams, well, why are you a team? And they have no idea. They have no idea what the work that they're doing is supposed to contribute to the larger organization. I mean, Simon Sinek talks about start with why, right? I mean, so liftoffs are an attempt to do the best job you can at starting with the why and then providing what other information is needed to also help boost that opportunity. And so we thought that not only do we need the why, which is what we called the purpose, which has three parts. It is the vision for the product. It is the mission for the team. What's the work they are supposed to do for this product? So, because sometimes you may have more than one team working on the same product. And so they need to understand that, but they need to understand what their part of the work on that is. So that's the mission. And then because of the time we were doing this and the nature of the agile world, we had what we called mission tests, right? So how are we going to know if we're making progress on our mission? And you might be doing that by holding retrospectives. You might be doing that in a lot of different ways, getting feedback from your customer, but small tests that you can run, that you can say, oh, we've been doing this work for 6 weeks and we expected to see this by this time. Are we seeing this? Are we not seeing it? What do we learn from whether we're seeing it or not seeing it? What can we learn from that? So we thought that was also very much a part of reinforcing the purpose. So the vision, mission, and mission tests. But then that's not really enough. And most folks understand that there needs to be some kind of team building, team development activity to help a team get started well. That you may want to continue to do them on, but you need them particularly right in the beginning. And we identified three things that we thought went in that area, which we called alignment. So, what we call simple rules, which are just philosophically how are we going to work together? And then, what are going to be sort of my guiding principles for how we work together? And then some what we call core team activities, which is how do we get to know each other if we haven't worked together before? Um, what do we think is important that we learn about each other right in the beginning that'll help us be work together, and then working agreements, those kind of basic daily, this is, these are our core hours, this is how we're going to make decisions, certain kinds of decisions, and get some of those agreements in place right at the start. And then that really, when you run into a bump or whatever, you've got those things to fall back on. And now having written the Lead Without Blame book, it's essential to building co-intelligence as quickly as you possibly can, right? I mean, all of this really is a piece of that, building co-intelligence. And then the last part, the third part, that we wanted to just have the essentials. So we just had these three essential elements, we called them: purpose, alignment, and then context. The number of teams who have no idea where they fit into the larger organization or where their work fits into the strategic direction, or I mean, there's just a context in time. How much time are we going to be given to do this? What are the things that might be um, out there kind of looming, or either opportunities or threats that might be looming out there that team members can identify. They don't have to come from outside the team. Team members can see some of that coming and spending a little bit of time on that. So on that one, we did a map, an organizational map. Where do we fit in the larger organization? We call that boundaries and interactions. And then there's another we called committed resources. How and what resources are we going to need from our context, from the rest of the organization? What of those do we already have while we're getting started? What do we not have? When can we get those? How do we get those? That kind of thing. And then finally, what we called prospective analysis. Look ahead in time. What can we predict is probably coming toward us, or what can we forecast is coming toward us? It may not, those may not be 100% accurate, but if we can begin to think about which of them are threats and which of them will create new opportunities, we can already have a plan in place to mitigate some and encourage others.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the team has that whole package. They understand their purpose, they understand how to be in alignment, they understand the context they're in, and that just gives you the greatest possible start. And yeah,
I it's funny because I have observed some leaders being kind of skeptical of like working agreements or
yeah,
these kind of kickoff activities, and I think it's because they view it as not real work or
yeah,
something. And yet, my own personal experience has been all of the time I've devoted to kicking things off well has paid for itself like 10 times
yeah,
over. Like it's been so much more
yeah,
valuable than I ever would predict
uh,
every time I've invested that
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And so I really, really love the premise of the book, and I've seen it in action.
yeah,
I've seen some very impressive
right.
results when we did this at New Relic.
Well, and I like that word that you used. It is an investment. It's
Yeah,
an investment. You can invest some time now right at the beginning. And if you're never going to bring a remote team together any other time, do it then, so that they
yeah,
can know each other. They've had a chance to spend time together, so on. Know how tall each other are, and I mean, just some of those basic things that you just never learn when you're, yeah, online all the time. Um,
yeah,
that that we if we invest in that, a day, 2 days, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. We save so much in thrashing later on.
yeah.
I mean, you're going to pay for it. If you don't do it here, you're going to pay for it later. Because
Absolutely.
because if you just expect the team to, okay, now get down to work, doing what,
Yeah,
and how, and even if there's a backlog. And sometimes we will add in some of those things. Sometimes we'll add in initial backlog creation into doing our particular liftoff. It's not always just those chartering elements. You might add in some other things. I like to have a leader in the organization, maybe the product sponsor or some, come in and say, why is this important work to do? There
oh
are a
yeah,
lot of different things that you can add into a liftoff beyond only the chartering, but the chartering is essential. It absolutely has to be there to get that good start, for sure.
yeah. That's been my experience. I mean, it's like if people don't know why their work is important or how it relates to the big picture, they're so much less
Yeah,
effective. And they may reverse engineer it, but
yeah,
it takes a lot of time.
right.
I know these are all big topics,
Yeah,
and so we're kind of skimming around
yeah,
like
right.
a lot of very
Mm-hmm.
meaty topics.
Right.
So the next one that I'd like to spend just a few minutes on is agile
The
fluency,
agile fluency model. Yeah,
and that was something I believe you worked on with Jim Shore,
yeah,
and I found it to be really insightful. It kind of describes like kind of some different places you can get to
Hmm.
as an organization. Do you mind describing the agile
Sure,
fluency
sure.
model a little bit?
Yeah, it was our response to what we were starting to see in the community of the one true Scotsman, the one right way to do agile, right? And there were people getting very invested in that, and it just did not match what Jim and I had seen in real organizations doing real work that had different conditions going on. They were different. The nature of the work was different. The nature of the products were different. Some folks are doing more toward IT work and DevOps kind of work, and others are doing, we're sending this product out into the world, and some are trying to be disruptive in their market, and other folks are just like, no, we've got this flagship product, we just want to keep making it better. So there are lots of different conditions, lots of different industries. I mean, all of those things, and there just was no way that there could be only one right way to do this. And so we started thinking about it, and it was a period of a few years where we came up with kind of an initial sense of what we thought it meant for a team to be prepared to do a certain kind of work. And we take that to our local Agile Open Northwest group every year, or and our local Agile PDX group, and we'd say, here, here's where we are so far. What do you think? And then we had a set of reviewers of people that we really respected, and we'd write it up a little bit more and send that out. And so it was, I mean, to the extent that anybody has ownership of these things, it was us who are officially the creators, but it was from the contributions of really hundreds of people over several years. And where we got to was, we could say there's roughly four buckets. And what we wanted to do is say, what is it a team needs to be able to do? That's such a weak word, but what is it? How do they need to be able to think? What kind of skill sets do they need? That there's those kind of things. What proficiencies are required for these various levels of work? And not really levels, zones. We ended up calling them zones because we thought of it as bus zones. It's like you only need the zone you need. If you live downtown and you need a building permit, you only ever need to stay in zone one if you're on the bus, right? And you'll get everything you need done that way, right? But if you need to go buy lumber and you want to go to the big box stores out in the suburbs, well, then you're going to need to go to zone 4 or 8 or whatever that turns out to be. So we thought of it in that way. We wanted to build a set of proficiencies that we knew would build on each other, but each would be sufficient for a certain kind of work. And so we ended up with these four zones. And over time, we've gotten a hint that there might be a fifth, but we haven't seen it enough to really define it. First, we say the starting point is maybe you're working as individual contributors. That's all working fine for you. Your manager's giving you your tasks. There's no teams involved. If that's working for you, fine. It doesn't work that well for a lot of people. And so that's where the model kicks in. It's like if you realize that you actually need to be working more in a collaborative team environment, that's the first shift you need to make. And so, learning how to bringing people together, helping them learn how to be a part of a team, helping them learn to interact together as a team with whoever is bringing them their backlog items, or the things that they need to work on, or helping them understand the business direction or whatever. And so there's a whole set of things to do around that. And they need enough programming skills to be able to do the work for that. So I've heard of organizations who will say um, that this is their team that they use for um, is devoted to helping the marketing department very quickly spin up new websites for new product features, right? And those might be up for 3 months or 6 months, but then it's going to come down because we're going to put a new one up there. So technical debt in that's not going to turn into a long-term legacy product. I mean, there might be elements of it that do, but so we're not as worried about that level of software engineering, but we are worried about the ability to do that kind of to build that kind of product. That's not the only example, but there are others where it's a more short-term product that there needs to be this ability to gel together as a team as quickly as possible, to understand how to work as a team and interact with the rest of the organization. And for many organizations, that's huge. Just that shift alone is
Yeah.
huge, right? And for some, it's not enough. So then we move into the next level, um, which which is more about more skilled software engineering things, being able to do continuous integration, being able to do continuous deployment, being able to really organize around common coding standards. And I mean, a lot of the XP stuff, the software craft stuff, that those kinds of things that the team there need to be team members who've really integrated that, and the same with tests, because we probably are even in a more cross-functional team at this point. There might be tech writers involved, or there probably are some kind of testing involvement in this, and maybe DevOps in it, right? And so this is a whole new set of proficiencies that we need to make sure that we are giving this team of people the opportunity to have what they need, because they probably are the folks who are cranking out the new features for the flagship product to keep our customers happy and that kind of thing. And that first zone and that second zone are really the two that most teams need. I mean, but some need more than that. And the third zone we call, I'm starting to remember, the optimizing zone. And this is when not only do we want to do the flagship project, but we're also doing some R&D on what's to come. And the team needs to have a much deeper and greater understanding of their customer and their environment and what new technologies are out there that we might have ideas for features that our customers would never think of on their own. And they become almost they are really a cross-functional team that might include some business people, some salespeople, some, that they're almost their own little internal startup kind of thing. Um, and there's a few of those around. They're not maybe common, but they are out there for sure. And we call that the optimizing zone. And that's another set of um, proficiencies and skills, fluencies, we call them, that they would need to do that. And then finally, we have one called the strengthening zone, which is where the team actually ends up having, it's more like a growing startup where maybe actual team members and teams are involved in making some of the organizational decisions, usually smaller organizations. You don't see big organizations doing this, but they might also um, support an innovation lab or some of those kinds of things, right? They're actually out there kind of creating some of the new ideas, the new governance ideas, the new the new tools, all that kind of stuff. So those are the four levels, and I'm chagrined that I'm not remembering the names of them, but the first two. But the second one's delivering, and
I think you're right.
Focusing, delivering, optimizing, and strengthening. That's what they are. Yes.
There we go.
I have
Awesome.
another model where we talk about focus on flow, and so I get I get them kind of confused. Anyway, um, so those four, the interesting thing about them is you can't really do delivering without the proficiencies that were in focusing. And you can't really do the optimizing teams without the proficiencies in focusing and delivering. And so they do build on each other, but they may not all be necessary. People think that they have to climb through the whole ladder, and no, that's not the intent. The intent is figuring out where you believe your team needs to be and then giving them the support to build the proficiencies, the fluency skills that they need for that level. And it may include some from previous levels and then all the ones from that, or previous zones, and then all the ones from that zone as well.
I
And
found that part about it
yeah,
really fascinating. It's not
yeah,
really a maturity model in that
no,
sense. It's much more of like, where do you want to go? And these are
yeah,
the skills to build to get there. And you don't necessarily have to go through it
yeah.
sequentially, which I found really
And
interesting.
we were inspired by language fluency, learning languages.
Mm.
If all I'm ever gonna do is go be a tourist someplace, I there's certain language skills I need to do that if I want to be able to interact. But I don't need to have the language skills about opening a storefront or holding or giving public speaking talks, or I mean, and so I always get a kick out of when people say, when I'm in another country and I have a few words in that language, they'll say, well, how fluent are you? Well, it depends on what I'm trying to accomplish, right? And the same thing with the agile fluency model. Depends on what your team needs to accomplish, and then there's a set of fluencies that you're going to need to look for skill, proficient skills, whatever you want to call that. And that's what the model is about. James Shore, in his book, The Art of Agile Development, the second edition that he published a couple of years ago, has a lot of information on it. And we have a website called agilefluency.org where you can go and get some information, and you can get sort of our original white paper to download. But in his book, The Art of Agile Development, he's got a lot more information about it, and kind of up to date from when he published that. We both were in conversation about, well, what else do we want to add to the model? And so that's the best resource to really learn about the Agile Fluency model. That and
That's awesome.
there's a wonderful game that he made that I love to play with different organizations and bring into like leadership groups and stuff, so they can. It's a simulation, but it's a simulation 2.5 years in a software project, and
I've played this game and it's amazing. It's very insightful. It
yeah,
really,
yeah,
I can say it shifted the perspective of all the people playing it.
yeah, yeah.
It's very well done.
Yeah, thank you. One anecdote about that. I played the game with a group of leaders in an organization, and they brought in like not just the engineering leaders, but leaders from across the organization. And after we'd played the game once, and then people had the kind of their feet under them, we played it again to see if they could improve their scores, and then we just had a conversation about what was their experience like. And this one guy who was from sales said, well, I don't know, I'm not sure how much this actually reflects real software development, because the engineering managers were saying, yeah, it's a lot like software development. And he was like, well, I'm not sure about that. And he thought a minute. He said, but I really wish there was a game like this could help me explain sales to everybody else in the
Oh
organization.
man,
And I
that is
thought,
so
well,
true.
what more could you want than that?
That is so true. I
Right.
mean, really, I would
Yeah.
love to see a set of simulations like this because, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
we don't understand how businesses work
No.
just
Right.
natively.
Right.
It- yeah.
Yeah. So it's fun. I love doing that with leaders in organizations and with teams. I do it sometimes with teams where they want to decide, what skills they want to build, and that's the conversation we have after they play the game.
I would love to turn our focus a little bit to some of your more recent work. And you've been focusing a lot more on leaders and I'm in particular on what you call valiant leaders.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd love to hear a little bit about your thought on why you've been focusing on leaders and
Hmm.
just a little bit more of what your recent thoughts and
Yeah.
direction have been.
Yeah. I mean, my heart has always been with teams and wanting teams to have the best possible work environment. And so a lot of my work has been the retrospectives work, the liftoff work has been to help teams to the extent they can create their own best environment. Years ago at the Agile conference, I did a keynote called "Best Job Ever." Right? I mean, and I really wanted to believe that people in teams could create that for themselves. Over time, I have come to realize that that is really an uphill battle if you do not have leadership in the organization that is supportive of it. And if the leaders in the organization aren't also engaged in trying to create those great environments. And so that's a lot of where it comes from. And then Trisha Broderick and I were working on all the things I do in collaboration with someone else. That's just how I work best. So Trisha Broderick and I were working on this book that turned out to be Lead Without Blame, and it, that was a central piece about as long as people are feeling blamed and shamed and made, other people trying to make them feel guilty or threaten them with, loss of their job or that kind of thing, you're never going to get the best out of people that way. Plus they're going to be miserable. But and I mean that maybe could be enough reason to not do it. The It's making people miserable, but evidently it isn't, because
It
that hasn't stopped us up until now. And
it's
so,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
what it occurred to us that what we needed to do was provide some guidance for leaders to understand how to lead without leaning on this crutch of blame and judgment and shame, and because it's just, I'm I'm a visionary person, I'm a humanist, but I'm also very practical. And it just isn't going to get us the results we want. It never will, right? And so I was thinking about that all the time that Trisha and I were writing the book, and I'd been having thoughts like that for a little while before. And so during the time that we were writing the book, I had a couple of epiphanies, that because I was like, well, my other books are all kind of in this other realm, and then I realized in the Agile Retrospectives book, in the Liftoff book, we always are referencing the relationship with leadership, always. And they're always not just about what's going on in the team and team dynamics, but they are also about what is the environment that the team is working in, and what information do they need that they are not getting, or whatever, right? And so I'm kind of mentally began creating this Venn diagram for myself, that as I looked at all the work I had done, it all and talks I've given, I mean all the contributions, it all had a kind of an intersection of building organizational capability, because that makes everybody happy.
Yeah.
The leaders are happy, the workers are happy, the customers, everybody's happy if the organization has, optimum capability, right? So what is it that goes, from my point of view, what is it that goes together for that? And I identified it's the leadership, it's the teams, it's the environment they work in. And so then I started thinking about, well, what is it about those things? And that's when I came up with the idea of valiant leadership, resilient teams, and dynamic environments, because that's the world we live in, the dynamic world. It's nothing stands still anymore. But the valiant leadership, that came around because one of the models that Tricia and I reference in our book, we call the 4 C's for learning leaders. Leaders who are supporting their own and the learning of others, because I really think the age we are in now is the learning work age. We have moved out of the knowledge work age.
That's so true.
Yeah, relying on past knowledge, no, we can't. I mean, we can draw on it, but we can't rely solely on that. We've got to be, there are constantly new things we need to be learning in a lot of different spheres. So, so one of in the 4 C's, we talk about courage, compassion, confidence, showing confidence in your team, and complexity. And when I thought about that, I thought about years ago when I was a kid. I don't even know how long this was still published, but there was a Sunday newspaper cartoon comics called Prince Valiant. And he was in the medieval time. Prince Valiant was in the medieval times. But he was a compassionate leader. He was a courageous leader. He pulled around himself a group of people he had total confidence in, and he knew how to understand how to work in his context. And so I thought, valiant, that's a great word. And
It's a wonderful word.
that's the word that we need to hold on to for the leaders we need to be and the leaders we need to help create and support in organizations, and encouraging that combination. You need courage, you need to be able to sometimes step into the unknown or admit there are things you don't know, or all of that, and that takes courage in today's organizations.
It takes a lot of courage,
It takes a
actually.
lot of courage, right?
Yeah.
But we need that, and we need people who understand they're working with humans. That compassion, and the fact that we are in this learning work world is actually very scary to a lot of people, because their experience with different learning contexts may not have been that great.
Hmm.
We run into that all the time. People are afraid to say that they are learning because they've been punished about it or whatever. And then confidence and so into my mind, valiant leaders are the ones that embody those 4 C's, that have the courage, compassion, confidence, and complexity that we need in today's world if we are going to be the people who deliver expectations to other people and need to support those other people in meeting our expectations.
Hmm.
And so that's where the term comes from.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So it seems like you're focusing a lot on like creating these very dynamic learning organizations, and you're focusing on leaders who are interested in like learning and leading more effectively within these organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, I mean, besides, I'm sure there's a lot of good content in the book, but do you have any advice for people that are like wanting to develop themselves more rapidly, or be a better leader, or create these better environments within their companies? Are those topics that you're delving into?
Yeah, well, they definitely are,
Hmm.
and I know there are a lot of programs out there that are focused on leadership in organizations, and I would encourage folks to take advantage of those. Um, what I've known as I've gone around, I am very fortunate in that I get the opportunity to go into organizations and do a couple of things. Some I will sit with circles of leaders at different levels of the organization, and they have the chance to just ask me whatever they want to ask me, and we have conversation about that, and I tell them what I know, and I point them to the resources I know about, and so on. And so I've been doing that, and I've also been invited in to come into meetings of senior leaders to be kind of an observer in those meetings and give them some ideas about how they, but so these are just ins and outs. These are I go in, I can be there for a while, I can give some good information, but that alone probably is not going to be sufficient. And but not every leader has the opportunity to go off on a 2 month leadership trip, or a couple of weeks of leadership training, and that isn't enough either. I mean, it really does work better for a group of leaders from an organization to be together and hear the same message and be able to have a conversation about that message, rather than one person here, one person there going off, because then they come back and they're fighting the wall of their whole organizational tradition, whatever that might be. So you want to build support networks for that. So that's one thing. I mean, look for the other people in your organization who also want to think differently about these things, maybe,
Mm.
and build a network of allies in your organization is a great thing. But what I notice is a lot of organizations have really pulled back on their support for professional development
Yeah.
uh, that comes from the outside,
Yeah.
or go out to a workshop, or even go to conferences. There's the support for that has gotten less. So I think it's important that we build our co-intelligence as leadership groups, and look for opportunities to make learning part of the work. So one of a graphic I use a lot in my talks is that when we learn something new and we apply it and we've really learned it and made it our own, we are changed. We
Yeah.
are not the person who didn't, we can't go back and be the person who didn't know any of that anymore, right? We can't do that. We are changed. And once we've undergone that change, we start seeing new things we want to learn. And it
Yeah.
becomes kind of this continuous cycle, right? And so paying attention to that. What are the new things I want to learn? What are the new things that I think would help my team be better? We In the book we build in a lot of reflection questions, and we're really encouraging folks to use the book as like a book club, and because the more you can make these things, this learning, whatever learning you're doing, part of your work, not something that you do separate. I mean, just like retrospectives, you've got to think of retrospectives as this is a part of the work. Improving things has to be a part of the work. Well, learning has to be a part of the work for professional people, for people in leadership roles. That's got to be part of the work, because if it's not, you run the risk of becoming irrelevant. So that's, yeah. I mean,
Uh,
yeah, I have tons of things to say about that, but yeah, that could be another whole.
I really love that. And I
Yeah,
also like how you emphasize the continuous nature of improvement.
right.
It seems like a thread that goes through a lot of your work,
Yeah,
and it seems more timely, like with every passing year, it
yeah,
gets more and more timely.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, and the more you try to set that aside and say, "Oh, well, we'll do that later," or "We'll do that separately," the less likely it is to happen.
yeah,
So if it's really important that we figure out how to make that part of our the daily expectations we have for ourselves and others.
yeah,
Yeah.
I really love that.
Hmm.
Um, and I also like how you talk about collaboration with others and kind of building a community of other leaders
Hmm.
around you.
Hmm.
And it occurs to me that coaching also can play kind of a similar role,
Yeah.
um, where you are like leadership is often very lonely.
Yeah.
You can often lack the peers around you to help you improve and learn.
Right. Right.
And that, with coaching, you're actually deliberately kind of creating that environment for learning for yourself.
I'd like to see more ways that people are doing that, not just as individuals,
I
but
agree.
as leadership groups. And maybe there's a coaching role for leadership groups, a group coach, something
Yeah,
like that. Um, because what I've noticed is that sometimes individual coaching starts being about that person's career possibilities or promotional possibilities or their ambitions, and that's all fine,
yeah,
but it's not going to broaden the focus to the system. And I think a
totally.
system, I mean, that's why we have complexity in there with the other three C's, right? We've got to be thinking in terms of the system as well. And yeah, so that's still working its way through my head.
Well, I'd love to talk with you about that. I do group coaching and
Yeah.
find it
Oh, good for
really
you.
interesting.
Yeah.
And then also at New Relic, we had peer coaching or
Mm-hmm.
peer support groups, which
Yeah.
were one of the most wonderful things we
Yeah.
came up with there. And it was a way for a group of managers to kind of, it was actually almost like a form of retrospective or problem
Mm-hmm.
solving together,
Yeah.
where we would meet once a week or once every other week and kind of talk about the challenges we were facing with your peers. And then they would basically help you problem solve your situation a little bit. And
Nice.
it
Yeah.
was amazing. It was actually so well received that
Yeah.
we had a lot of people apply to work there just because they
Yeah.
had heard about it.
So that's another benefit,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It becomes a recruitment benefit if you want to bring on the best leaders.
Yeah, I mean, when
Right?
you create that's those sort of learning
Yeah.
organizations,
Right.
like people want to be a part of it because they know that they're
Absolutely.
growing and
Right.
developing, and so
Yeah.
it's not just good for the business; it's good for the
Right.
people involved.
Right.
Can you share with us like where people can find your books and how they can get into contact with you?
Well, the most of them are available on, Amazon or any good, any bookseller that you particularly like.
Hmm.
And a few of them are more on LeanPub. A couple of them are on LeanPub. I've got two unfinished books on LeanPub, but you can buy both of them right now.
Oh, cool.
One is called Five Rules of Accelerated Learning, which I wrote with my son Willem, and the other book is called Agile Coaching Qualities, and it's a project that came out of the Agile PDX, our local user group. A number of us working together on trying to define how do people identify really great coaches? What are the things that they admire, the qualities they admire in really great coaches? And so we put that together, and it's not finished yet, but it's out there in book form, and we're asking people for feedback. So yeah, those things are available. You can find information about them uh, to some extent on my website. My website's a work in progress, but dianalarsen.com. I'm on LinkedIn for sure. That's and everything's listed there. And yeah, I'm on a couple of other social media platforms and things, but I'm kind of out there. Ron Jeffries, one time, somebody asked him for his email address or whatever, and he said, "You know, if you want to find me, you'll be able to find
You'll
me."
find me.
And I kind
That's
of
so true.
and I kind of feel that way too. It's like I'm not too hard to find, and I think that's one of the things. Actually, that's one of the things I think I'm known for is that I'm a pretty accessible person.
Well, this has been a total delight. It's been so much fun. If I can ever be helpful to you, let me know. And
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to sharing this conversation. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Decoding Leadership. As always, I welcome your questions and feedback. And if you're looking for coaching or advisory help, you can contact me at rubik.com. See you next time.